Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Coffee Weekly. My name is Sheldon, and I'm here with the other host.
Otto, hello, nice to meet you.
Today, we're going to be talking about unleashing creativity, which is this thing that some people think that they don't have. But I'm a believer that everybody has a creative side. Maybe it's a leashed or asleep. And the idea here is we are going to be talking about how we got our creative side awakened and how we are taking care and nurturing our creativity. Do you have any thing on your creative side? I'm laughing because I already know the answer, but can you tell to the audience?
Yes, I mean for me it's pretty much music, and there was a time in my life not too long ago, which was 2021, so now it's 1.5 years ago, where I was facing the exact same question, like, wait a second, what am I doing on my creative side? Because I was feeling like really missing something. I was not feeling, satisfied with what I was doing, even though I was happy and I had everything I needed. I felt somewhat empty. And at some point, I realized, oh, yeah, maybe it's something that I have a passion for, something that is the creative side. And I was thinking, okay, what can I do? So I tried like drawing. Oh my God, don't let me draw. It's terrible. I know I can't do UX design, web design, architecture, whatever, interior design. I mean, I try my best, but I was like, none of those things are, you know, at a level that I would feel happy with it. I mean, of course, everyone can start stone sculpting, but how fun is it going to be if you start from completely zero and it's kind of hard to start with? So I was thinking, I was like really, you know, I mean, feeling I need to do something. And then I remembered, I don't know how I didn't think about it in the first place, that I was like, when I was 15, I got a little DJ controller from my parents, which I think is the best present ever. And I did like some house parties, birthday parties, and everything. And but I somewhat stopped doing that when I was studying. And then I found, okay, this is the creative side. I listen to music all day long anyway. So maybe producing or like making or DJing is like the natural step to get back to what I can. I mean, I know how it works, and it just like I can let my creativity flow. So that was my summarized story of why I do music. What about you? What's your creative side, Trevor?
Yeah, it's funny because as you're talking about music, I have a relationship with music as well, and it started at a young age. But there's this thing, and it's a recurring topic when I talk in the podcast, which is being throwing back to your childhood and narrowing down your storyline, the story of a life, because those chain, sorry, chain of events lead up to who you are today. So I believe that I was introduced to music when I was very, very young, but the way that I was introduced to music wasn't really awakening the creative side, because with music, you can produce music, you can improvise, you can play around, but you can also read a music sheet, which is like a piece of paper with instructions, and then you just play the instructions. So the way that I was playing music was always with the music sheet, and because of that, I kind of never really awakened my creative side with music. And nowadays I'm trying to do this more, like sometimes I gather with friends and we play together, and I try to do a little bit of improvisation and stuff like that. And it's really, really hard. So I think that I'm not, it's not a closing thought already, but something, a call to action for people. Try to identify what is actually creative on the things that you're doing, because sometimes some things that they can be creative on the forefront, but at the end of the day, you're just following some instructions. There is an author, and actually happens to be my favorite author. His name is called Seth Godin, and he talks a lot about being creative and have your craftsmanship or crafting. Yeah, anyway, this verb that is hard to pronounce, because it's kind of like a little bit of practice and a little bit of art as well. And there's several aspects. I'm not going to talk to everything in all at once. I'm going to give the mic back to you and ask you, what do you think about the actual creative side, and like what happens in your brain when you're doing something actually creative?
I mean, this is a process I actively think about quite a lot, because if I try to categorize the process of being creative, I can categorize it into two parts. The one thing is obviously the technical ability or skills to perform a certain thing. So you have something in mind, and how well are you able to produce that thought into whatever the final art is supposed to be? It can be painting, it can be digital, it can be music, it can be voice, anything. So that's the one thing. And the second thing, which is everything around that, which is not what you intend to do, but something that happens. So basically, you just let yourself flow. You just let the creativity come out of you, but you need certain tools. I mean, you need like a baseline structure to give it, like a tool to come out. So if you think about singing, you might have maybe some melody in your head, but if you don't know how to hit the tone, well, you will not hear your own melody, and you might not even be able to let the thoughts you have flow out, because you cannot, capture them. You cannot express them in that way. So when I, for example, apply that to my own creative side. So for example, I know DJing, whatever I want to do, I can make it happen. I know exactly which songs, what combination, what time, what effects, what EQing, everything. I can make it exactly sound how I want to. And now with music production, something that I am more new to, I'm getting there, but sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, I really want, you know, this to build up this way, and then create a little gap and then make it drop or some. And I'm like, I don't know, it doesn't really sound the way that I want it. But now the more I try doing this, the more I'm able to build the tools up myself. Or, I mean, I have the idea, I want to play something live. I want to, while I create the song, I want to jam on it. So I try out something and I have my MIDI controllers and I do everything and I spend like hours configuring everything. I do for like 5 minutes. I'm like, that sucks. So maybe not. And then sometimes I do something for 2 minutes and I'm like, oh my God, this is exactly what I wanted. And so it's important to, I don't know, you can compare many things to like a car engine. It's important to think about, okay, what basic bare bone hard or soft skills do you need to, let's say, physically be able to do what you want to achieve. So if you want to play the piano, you need like agility in your fingers. You need to know coordination. You need to know being on beat, being on time. So those are hard skills. They by
Yeah.
themselves, they don't make you any creative. And then if you want to, you know, add the creative side on top of your skills, to get the engine running, what is the fuel basically? Most of the time you will have enough inside of yourself. Because the things we do in everyday life is kind of boring sometimes. At work you might not be that creative usually. I mean, there's creative work of course, but as IT person, people, we're not, I mean, I would say not very often that super creative. So we have a lot of like a backlog of creativity that just wants to flow out. But let's say you have a free day, you want to do something, and you have like the classical writer's block. There's nothing to come in. There's also ways to feed that or to nurture your creative flow, not the skills, but the creative side. For example, when it comes to music, oh, you want to produce more, I don't know, lo-fi music? Well, you can just listen to lo-fi music. And then over time, your brain will hear, it will be inspired, it will create its own tunes, it will connect the music you hear to the music you know, and then boom, you have created some new juice that you can flow out and then do something. So that's when I try. I mean, this is how I perceive it. Maybe you have a similar interpretation, but I would be curious to hear about you.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you said is aligns with how I think. And yeah, maybe I'll go over on how I think, and then we can compare later. So basically, when I think about creativity, I think about everything that every activity that creates something, either something that is abstract, like a sound that you're listening, or something tangible, like a cake that you baked. But when you bake a cake, you're following a recipe, and this is not creative, because then you're just literally like acting like a robot. But if you feel like, oh, I don't have sugar, I'm gonna use honey instead to do this recipe. So now you're touching your creative side, because you're improvising, you're discovering. It's kind of like you enabling the explorer inside of yourself. Like you said, like you hear a beat and you compare, you have a reference, you apply your own filter to that reference, and then you create something new. And I think that applies to pretty much a lot of activities. Of course, like daily activities don't have the creative side. Like, for example, when you were cleaning your house, doing any chore, like there's no creativity on these things, but or there can be, but I don't know if it's easy to infer creativity on those things. But I think that a lot of jobs, they have a little bit of creative nature. Like, for example, we create code. It can be creative when you try a new approach, or you do something, try a new technology or stuff like that. But if you're just doing like the basics of accessing a database or putting the data on the screen or stuff like that, then it can be like following a recipe, something that you just do it kind of mindlessly, and you don't touch the creative side. And then there is a lot of fake creativity as well. You think that you're doing something creative, like, for example, oh, I'm gonna start painting, but you're just following tutorials. And even with code, like, I'm gonna start coding, and you just follow tutorials. And then you just kind of like are doing what you told. I don't think that this type of exercise inspires creativity. I think you have to like, we have this this saying in Portuguese. I don't know if it has in English, but you have to bang your head against the wall and try and try and try, because with trial and error, you actually are exercising your creative, the creative side of your brain, and you're actually creating something instead of just following a recipe. I think that's the main gist of what is like the creative and non-creative aspect of any activity at all.
I think the best example that comes to mind is, yeah, like playing by a sheet on any instrument, for example. I think it's a great way to get started, obviously, because if you start learning something new, you don't know what to do. You might hear a tune in your head, but you have no idea how to translate it into mechanical movements. So, I mean, I was also having piano lessons when I was younger, and I remember the same thing. I hated playing by sheets. I was so like, oh, it's so annoying, and it's always the same, obviously, and sometimes it works well, but sometimes I just do the same mistakes all the time. And so now in hindsight, I can say it would have been better for me to understand that this was not, let's say, feeding the creative side. Really, it was more feeding the technical side. And this is something I need, because now when I play the piano, for example, I never play any songs, like almost ever. Maybe like once a year I come across a sheet and play it, but I just sit there, I play like 3 random notes, or maybe just one, and then I just keep playing. But now I realize that the times I did play by sheet, they helped me to develop some patterns that I can repeat, or some chord progressions, or I don't know, some fast movements with the finger, or like, these kind of things that now I realize I kind of suck at because I haven't played enough for the sheets. But so it's obviously less fun for most people, I would say, to play by a paper than to play by your imagination. But depending on what your goal is, you need to adjust what you do, how much time you spend on each. If you want to play, experimental ambient music, crazy ass sounds, well, just play whatever the fuck you want. I think you need more time to be able to like go with the waves and whatever you have. But if you want to perform at a concert and play Bach's old sonates, well, then practice. That's what you do. But then again, like, it is creative in a sense that you can put your interpretation on it, your dynamics, your speed, but this is a whole different layer of how you express your creativity. And I think for many people, it's more like you want to create something whole yourself, not just like the final touch. Maybe you want to do your own song or your own composition or orchestra or whatever you want to do.
Yeah,
But one thing or maybe you go ahead. Sorry.
sorry, no, I just want to touch on this point that you mentioned, and actually, I even took a note here because this can maybe a topic for a whole episode. Is the power of practice, and it's actually the last book I haven't read yet, but it's the last book that Seth Godin released, and it's called The Practice. But it's actually, if you listen to his talks or his podcasts or any of his books, you can get this idea of how important a practice is, and I kind of know this intuitively because I like math. And so whenever I say to people that don't like math, like they say to me, "Oh, you're so logical. You think logically." And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, I have a muscle that is my brain, and I practice it with logical things. For example, studying math. And studying math is like going to the gym. You go to the gym, you do like this, like a bicep curl. You don't do this on a day-to-day basis. Like your day-to-day life, you do other types of movements, but the movements that you do in the gym, they make you perform your mobility better on your daily activities. So you're never going to do the movements that you do in the gym on your daily life, but they help you go through your daily life. With music, for example, there is a part of your learning process that you just practice scales and arpeggios and so on and so forth. And you're like, "Oh, I hate this because it's so boring, like da 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 da, going forward, back and forth." And but then those, as you said, those are going to help you to produce like chords and progressions and so on and so forth, because it's the base knowledge, it's the fundamentals and the foundation of your knowledge that you need to practice, which is something that you need to account for when you're starting a new creative hobby. Because at the beginning it might not feel creative because you have to first create your base, and then when you go from there, then it feels more like a creative exercise.
I think as almost always in every episode, it's like the balance is what matters. I mean, you can start out by going 80% technical side, 20% improvising, and then the better you become, you can switch it the other way around. That you still keep like polishing your technical skills, but then you still give the main space to in the creative juice flow out. But so one thing I wanted to get a bit back to. So now we dived a lot into the technical and like concrete examples. And I think this is what, in the end of the day, is what the most of the time we were thinking about. But I want to take at least one step back and also reflect a little bit on how do people unleash their creativity, or when does it happen? For example, one thing that has been observed quite a lot is that during the pandemic, people had a lot of time at home, and many people picked up, producing music, drawing, DJing, digital web design, any of these things, because you have more time and you might spend it on these kind of things. And the more you spend it on these kind of things, they grow and they become a thing. And you might buy your, I don't know, pencil set or whatever, your controller or piano or whatever. So just by giving it more space, it's like, if you sign up for a gym, if you go to the gym more often, you will have the ability more. And I think that's something that is a nice side effect of the pandemic in some way, that many people were forced to take a step back. They could not do their usual things. They had maybe some time at their disposal. And this led to many people forcibly, or not forcibly, but incidentally, like unleashing their creativity because they were just exposed to it. And very often, let's say you played the piano when you're younger, and then after like 20 years, you pick it up, and then suddenly like it awakes again. I think you just need like a little trigger, like a little flame to light it up. But once you have it inside of you, it's very rewarding. It's a lot of fun. It feels very natural, and it will probably keep coming if you just give it like a little bit of, of a food to keep going. Which can be like, if you just put a piano in your room, if you give it space, well, maybe some days you're like, oh, I have 10 minutes of time. I have nothing to do. Let's just play some piano. And this is exactly what the steps people can take. So first of all, you have to identify, is there anything that you have done in the past? is there anything that you want to do or always want to do, or something you have access to? So maybe you don't have the money or the interest to buy something, but hey, your best friend or your neighbor has a full studio with equipment or has a workshop where you can build things. Well, you can just go there, right? And you can just do it. So that's the first thing. Identify the opportunities. And second thing is think about your time. Is really, I mean, there's a saying, okay, I don't really know it, but if you know where a person spends their money, you know who they are. If you know where money a person spends their time, or look at your calendar and know who you are, basically. So these are the two things that if you spend a lot of time on the technical skills, it might get boring. If you spend a lot of time doing the creative side, you might not produce things that are probably what you want. This is, I mean, very generic, but so be very mindful about that. Be aware that mastering something can take years, or maybe doing something good enough that you will like it can take at least months. But being able to just play something small, tutorials, can take between weeks and days. Or like just getting started can be literally one YouTube video ahead, or one tutorial or blog or book, or just trying out yourself. So be mindful about the time. And last but not least, I think it's listen to a lot about, like, you should have like a feedback loop. You cannot just go ahead and do something and then after like 3 weeks wonder why it's not fun. But observe, did I feel fun doing this? Did I like this? Does it make me feel good? Is the quality good? And then give it more or less time, whatever you need.
What's the name? What's the name of this process? So since we talked about music, so there is like when a singer is singing and then they are listening to themselves in their own ears. Do you know what the name of this?
Monitoring.
I think it's feedback.
Feedback, yeah. I mean, feedback is any kind of thing that comes back. But usually feedback in audio means that there's a bad feedback loop that is like, yeah, and then like you have a very high frequency and you're like, my ears.
But anyway, regardless of the name, like singers, when they are performing, they listen to themselves, because if they are out of tune, if the microphone is not regulated and not well enough. So I think like the feedback is quite important. And I'm gonna jump into my conclusion as well, which is pretty much as you said. Like I think first of all, you have to have a checking point, a point of awareness, where you introspect into yourself and think like, what do I like? Because maybe you don't even know what do you like, and try to identify that. And another tip that I do is that I want to give is have a growth mindset. So there's this idea of fixed mindset versus growth mindset, and you can Google it. And basically the idea is that growth mindset is that you can learn new things, which is nice, and then try things out. I've tried painting, watercolor, music, programming, different technologies. You can create spark creativity in your own work as well, and outside of work, of course. And also look for friends, as Otto mentioned. Sometimes I speak with Otto about music because he has the knowledge, and I can have a one-time mentoring every now and then. And it's nice because then I have like a topic to talk about. We can chat, and it's cool, and I learn something new. And I have a friend that plays guitar. I do the same thing, and a friend that plays piano. I do the same thing, and so on and so forth. A friend that paints, a friend that is a designer. So there's always something that you can exchange with your contacts, and you can grow and create a new hobby, and hopefully a creative one.
Nice.
So that's it for me.
Yes, I took a bit more on the final thoughts, but I think we complement each other quite well. But yes, I hope this episode helps everyone to find their side a bit more, give them more energy and time and space. And we're hoping that you can take away something from that. That's it from us. There was episode 29, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
29. Have a hobby, and at the end of this episode, put in a comment what you're gonna have as a hobby for 2023, and see you in the next episode.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.